They say timing is everything. I should have known mine was off the moment Darren smiled too easily. It was a Monday morning, too early for false optimism. But there it was, plastered across his face like a politician before election week. I had rehearsed my points all weekend: revenue growth, client retention, the cross-border system I architected, the 6-country rollout, 5 years of work that turned a clunky regional workflow into a global KPI powerhouse. And last quarter, that system helped us secure a $60 million deal. A raise wasn't a reward, it was overdue recognition. Darren had only been CEO for 3 weeks. He came in with that classic outsider energy: clean suits, sharper buzzwords, no real grasp of the legacy systems. But I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I had no reason not to. Not yet. "Thanks for coming in. Tina," he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. His office was still bare. No pictures, no personal items. Just a laptop, a whiteboard, and an untouched succulent wilting in the corner. I got straight to the point. I wanted to talk compensation. Specifically, adjusting my salary to reflect the expanded scope I've been managing. He nodded slowly. Almost too slowly. "I've reviewed your file," he began. "Your contributions are impressive, especially with the KPI system. But we're in the middle of a major organizational review. Until the structure settles, we're freezing all compensation discussions. It's not about you, it's about timing." There it was again. Timing. I kept my expression steady. "So no adjustments this quarter?" "Not yet," he replied. "Let's revisit after the realignment." He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting before I could say anything else. As I stepped into the hallway, my phone buzzed with an alert. "Team Sync, updated workflow vision." Curious. I stopped by the glass board outside the analytics war room. A new KPI architecture was drawn out. Detailed. Color-coded. Freshly labeled. The core structure was mine. Every diagram. Every metric path. Except, my name wasn't anywhere. Jason's was. And that was the first time I realized this wasn't just about timing. This was the start of something else entirely. The calendar invite came at 6:12 in the morning, titled simply Realignment, 10:30 in the morning, Darren's office. No agenda, no context. Just 15 minutes blocked off, squeezed between 2 of his finance meetings. I stared at it for a moment, heart skipping in that familiar, instinctive way, when something feels wrong before your brain catches up. I arrived at 10:28 in the morning. Darren didn't look up from his laptop when I knocked. "Come in," he said, eyes still on the screen. There was no coffee offered this time, no handshake, just a sterile room and silence so thick. I had to force my breath to stay even. He finally glanced up, closed his laptop with a snap, and folded his hands. "Tina, I'll get straight to it. As part of the organizational restructuring, we're shifting leadership responsibilities in the systems division." My stomach dropped, but I kept my face still. "Effective immediately. You'll be stepping into a senior analyst role, advisory capacity. You'll retain your salary and benefits. But moving forward, you'll report to Jason, who will lead the global KPI initiative." "Jason?" I blinked. The Jason who just last month asked me what predictive load balancing meant? The same Jason who once crashed the sandbox server running a test model because he forgot to cap the input? I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Darren continued, as if reading from a script. "This isn't about performance. It's a strategic decision. Jason represents a new leadership profile, fresh perspective, growth focus. We value your experience, but we also need alignment with where we're heading." I nodded slowly, my throat tightening. "And what exactly is my role in this advisory capacity?" "Think of it as a mentoring position. You'll guide the team, provide legacy knowledge, but from a non-decision-making standpoint." Non-decision-making. It felt like being surgically removed from my own brainchild and handed a guest pass to the operation room. The meeting ended 3 minutes later, No room for questions, just polite phrases like, "Thanks for your understanding," and "We're counting on your support during this transition." As I walked back to my desk, the office buzzed around me like nothing had happened. I sat down, opened my inbox, and there it was, a company-wide announcement. Exciting news! Jason Miller appointed as a lead strategist, Global KPI Initiative. His photo was attached, smiling, confident, in a suit he probably bought last week. My name wasn't mentioned. I stared at the screen, the words blurring. 5 years, hundreds of nights, and every line of code I'd written, now filtered through someone else's title. Shock held me still, but somewhere beneath it, deeper than the hurt, a different feeling stirred, something sharper, not anger, awareness. This wasn't a realignment, it was a quiet erasure. The company-wide meeting started at 9:15 in the morning. I sat in the middle row of the auditorium, third seat from the left, close enough to be seen, far enough to disappear. Darren stood center stage, holding the mic with that same polished charisma he'd worn since day one. The screen behind him displayed a looping animation of rising graphs, contract logos, and the bold white title, Q2 Strategic Vision, Scaling Smarter. His voice echoed with confidence. "Before we dive in, I want to recognize someone who's been instrumental in transforming our KPI infrastructure, a system that's now at the core of our $60 million global expansion." For a split second, my breath caught. Some small, stubborn part of me still hoped. Maybe, just maybe, he would do the right thing. "Let's give it up for Jason Miller, our new lead strategist." Applause exploded across the room. Jason stood near the aisle, grinning, adjusting his blazer as he walked to the stage like it was always meant to be his. I sat frozen. No one even looked in my direction. Darren continued. "Jason spearheaded our new metrics logic, simplified the performance tracking layers, and drove a culture of proactive analytics that's unmatched in the market." I stared at the slideshow behind them, my slides, my framework. I knew every line of those charts, every color-coded index and data weight formula. I had built them in silence, nights and weekends, through testing errors, client feedback loops, and long meetings with compliance. And now, they were Jason's legacy. The clapping died down. Darren motioned to the next slide. A heat rose behind my ears when I noticed the file name in the corner of the screen. Tina KPI Arch Final PPTX. They hadn't even bothered to change the file name. I sat there, hands folded, nodding slightly as if I were a guest at someone else's party. Around me, coworkers whispered about Jason's brilliance and how fast he turned things around. My badge felt heavier than usual around my neck, like a name tag for a person who no longer existed. Later that day, around 1:50 in the afternoon, an internal email hit my inbox. Subject line, "Congratulations, Jason!" I opened it. The header image? A custom banner featuring one of my original dashboard layouts, cropped, but still unmistakably mine. No one noticed. Or maybe, no one cared. I stepped away from my desk, locked myself in an empty conference room, and sat with the lights off. There was no screaming, no tears, just a silence so loud it pulsed in my ears. The erasure wasn't just happening behind closed doors anymore. Now, it was lit up on a screen, framed by applause. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't storm into Darren's office demanding answers. I didn't even reply to the email. I did what people like him never see coming. I stayed quiet, but beneath that silence, my mind was sharpening like a blade. By 7:15 in the morning the next day, I was at my desk with a fresh cup of coffee and a new focus. The system. My system. I opened the back-end architecture, dug into the core layers, and traced the data flows from server to dashboard. Jason had begun implementing changes already, surface-level tweaks to naming conventions, cosmetic layout edits. But the foundation was untouched. They hadn't dared alter the bones, probably because they didn't know how. What they also didn't know, I had embedded microstructures throughout the system, tiny patches of logic meant to stabilize the load balancer, recalibrate lag time, or auto-clean redundant entries. Those structures weren't in the documentation. I had written them in the early days. Before we even had a compliance lead, they were invisible to anyone who hadn't lived inside this system like I had. As I worked, I kept my headphones in, face unreadable. Colleagues passed my desk like I wasn't there. I smiled, nodded. But behind my screen, line by line, I was reacquainting myself with every decision I'd ever made. And that's when I saw it. Buried deep in the core logic module, the engine that supported everything, the predictive model, the KPI scheduler, the risk forecast simulator. It was all still running on NutraFrame, a proprietary framework I'd licensed privately 3 years ago when the team's budget request had been denied. Back then, I had bought the license using my own funds. I needed stability and couldn't wait for red tape. No one had ever updated it. No one had ever replaced it. I opened the license panel. Owner, Tina Reyes. License type, Developer Enterprise. Status, active, auto-renews March 2026. I sat back in my chair. That framework wasn't owned by the company. It was tied to my name, my credit card, my signature. They had demoted me, erased me from the conversation, but they were still running their entire $60 million operation on a skeleton that belonged to me. I didn't say a word. Not that day, not the next. No dramatic confrontation, no threats. Just quiet revisions, shifting, isolating, preparing. Because if they thought I was out of power, they were only looking at the surface, and surface never told the full story. The real systems always run beneath it. By 8:20 in the morning, I was already in the system, headphones on, eyes steady, breath quiet. They thought I was just moving on. Jason had taken my seat. Darren had moved on to his next boardroom performance. HR had already reassigned my responsibilities into tidy bullet points. No one suspected a thing. Perfect. I wasn't angry anymore. That kind of heat is messy, unpredictable. What I felt now was cooler, surgical, precise. I knew every bone of the system, every nerve ending, and I knew exactly how to make it sing a tune so sweet. No one would notice the underlying rot until it was far too late. I started with the KPI weighting algorithm. Originally, I designed it to reward balance, client satisfaction, retention rate, lead conversion accuracy, healthy signals, honest growth. But under Jason's new management style, volume was king. So I leaned into it. On the surface, I rewrote the logic to inflate short-term data spikes, click volumes, report generation counts, API activity bursts. The numbers would now look phenomenal, but they'd be hollow, like cotton candy at a distance, colorful, full, and mostly air. Then I turned to the forecasting engine. The original model had been robust, pulling from 7 variables including vendor response lag, seasonal purchasing trends, logistics traffic, and failure rates. I stripped it down, 4 variables. And I introduced a slight bias in the demand curve algorithm, subtle enough that predictions still looked right, but were actually misaligned by 7 to 12%. Not a cliff, just enough drift to cause quiet chaos 2 or 3 cycles later. Next was the alert suppression. Our alert system used to be the crown jewel, smart, dynamic, responsive. It flagged anomalies before humans even noticed patterns forming. But not anymore. I disabled 3 major early warning layers, removed their triggers, replaced them with polite review pending delays. Now the system would remain calm while burning from within. Beautiful, dangerous. By 11:40 in the morning, I was in the quarterly metrics call. Jason stood at the front of the room, walking everyone through the updated dashboard. The screen glowed with color-coded bars, green across the board. Uptime, client engagement, sales velocity, it all looked perfect. Too perfect. Darren leaned back, arms folded behind his head, smiling like a man who believed he'd just won something. This is what I'm talking about, he laughed. We turned that clunky legacy mess into a high-precision profit engine. No one noticed my smile in the back row. It wasn't pride. It wasn't bitterness. It was restraint. Let them believe they'd perfected the machine. Let the green lights lull them deeper into delusion. I wasn't sabotaging. I was observing. Monitoring every variance they ignored, every metric they worshipped, every crack they mistook for polish. Because when it all came undone, and it would, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. I'd just let the data speak for itself. By 9:30 in the morning, the glass conference room was already full. People shifted in their seats, coffee in hand, murmuring with excitement. On the screen, a sleek deck of quarterly results, animated graphs dancing with green arrows and rising lines. I sat near the end of the table, silent, invisible. Jason stood at the front, confident, over-rehearsed. He wore a navy blue blazer that still had faint fold lines from the department store rack. He cleared his throat. "Let's, with the forecast accuracy," he said, clicking to a slide titled Precision at Scale on the screen. A bright green banner read, 98.6% forecast reliability. The room responded with a collective nod of approval. Darren smiled, arms folded behind his back like a proud professor. Investors beamed. I stared at the slide, and I felt my jaw tighten. That number was a lie, not a rounding error, not a slight mistake, an engineered illusion. The new system, with its stripped variables and weakened coefficients, wasn't capable of hitting anywhere near 90%, let alone 98.6%. The last model I'd simulated, before stepping back, had already shown a projected drift of 12%, and that was before Jason's simplifications. He didn't even seem to understand the risk factors he was ignoring. Or worse, he knew, and didn't care. Our client delivery timelines have improved by 14%, he added, clicking forward. Stockouts have dropped to an all-time low. We're ahead of market curve by 3 months. The truth? Deliveries were improving only because the alert system had been silenced. They weren't seeing the missed shipments, the delays, the mismatched invoices, because no one was listening. And stockouts? The calculation had been altered to delay recognition until 2 cycles later. It was like disabling a smoke detector, then celebrating that nothing ever caught fire. I looked around the room. Every face was nodding, approving. Darren leaned in. "Jason, these are some of the best performance metrics we've ever seen." Applause followed. Smiles, eye contact, affirmation, and I sat there, stone-faced. They were clapping for something I had built and quietly dismantled. They were praising a version of the system that no longer existed, running on algorithms designed to deceive, dressed up in the language of progress, but I said nothing. Because the longer the illusion held, the deeper the eventual fracture. And I wasn't going to stop it. I was going to document it. That evening, at 6:40 in the afternoon, I was reviewing historical trend files on my personal terminal. I tracked performance drift over the past 5 weeks, highlighting false gains and unreported gaps. As I saved the file, a notification pinged. LinkedIn. Message request from Priya Menon, Client VP, Northbridge Health. My heart skipped. I opened it. "Hi, Tina. Quick question. Are you still overseeing the KPI system? We've noticed some strange shifts in the data outputs lately. It doesn't feel like your work. Hope you're well." I stared at the screen for a long time. They noticed. Someone noticed. And in that quiet moment, my anger didn't explode. It concentrated, sharper, more focused. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because soon, the numbers would speak louder than I ever could. By 8:50 in the morning, I was standing near the back window of the operations floor, watching the city crawl to life. My inbox was quiet, my Slack notifications minimal. Jason had stopped copying me on anything. Meetings I used to lead happened without me. Status reports I once reviewed now landed directly in Darren's inbox. And yet, every metric they praised was still built on a system I had engineered. I approached Mia, a colleague I'd worked alongside for years, someone I thought still saw me. "Have you noticed the forecast models?" I asked carefully. "They're skewing heavily. I've logged at least 4 major misalignments between projected and actual delivery timelines." She glanced up from her screen. Blinking. "I mean, maybe, but it's not really your thing anymore, is it?" The words hit harder than they should have. "I'm not trying to interfere," I said. "I just think someone should—" "Tina," she interrupted gently, "I know you care. We all know you built this place, but things are moving forward. It might be time to stop holding on." I stood there for a second too long, then nodded, forcing a polite smile. "Right. Of course." By 10:20 in the morning, I returned to my desk. The company had never felt so full and so empty at once. Conversations happened around me, but not to me. People passed without eye contact. It was like I had become background noise, part of the furniture they forgot to replace. And then the email came in. Subject: urgent, order delay, Northbridge Health. I opened it. A major shipment had failed to arrive. According to the system, everything had cleared, but the client's confirmation said otherwise. Incomplete batches, outdated units, and missing documentation. The fulfillment team hadn't even flagged it, because no flags had triggered. I read the message twice. Northbridge was one of our legacy clients. High value, high volume, loyal. Until now. By 2:45 in the afternoon, word spread that Northbridge was pulling out of their upcoming renewal. It was worth close to $8 million. Jason claimed logistics hiccup. Darren called it client overreaction. But I knew better. This was the first fracture, the beginning of the unraveling, and no one wanted to admit it. In the late afternoon, a new name appeared on the calendar. Ken Albright, systems consultant. A note in the IT group chat confirmed he was an external contractor brought in to audit and optimize back-end performance. Translation: Darren had finally sensed the cracks, but was too proud to ask the person who built the foundation. I watched as Ken walked in, gray-haired, expensive laptop, polite confidence. By 4:50 in the afternoon, he was hunched over Jason's monitor, deep in code. I listened from a few desks away. "I'm trying to trace the predictive module," Ken said. "But where's the top-level logic call? This framework's got hidden references I can't map. It's like legacy stuff." Jason cut in. "She made it complicated on purpose." Ken raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe just advanced." Jason didn't answer. Neither did I, because I had already stepped out of that circle. I wasn't part of their solution or their blame. I was alone, on the outside, watching the foundation slip beneath their feet, and for the first time, I didn't try to stop it. By 7:15 in the morning, I was alone in the office, just as planned. No lights, no chatter, only the glow of my screen and the quiet. Rhythmic tapping of keys. I wore the silence like armor now. Solid, familiar, unshakable. The board meeting was scheduled for 8:30 in the morning. They'd be reviewing the quarterly systems report. The same polished, misleading set of metrics Jason had spent the week embellishing. I'd already seen the deck. It was a symphony of green graphs, sugar-coated KPIs, and milestone achievements based on a system that no longer reflected reality. But this time, the data would speak louder than the script. I opened the custom script I'd written weeks ago, buried beneath a layer of redundant system logs, triggered only when a specific configuration was loaded into the boardroom dashboard. No one else knew it was there. Not IT, not Jason, certainly not Darren. The message wasn't dramatic, just 6 lines, injected into the auto-generated executive report. Quiet, surgical, precise. I clicked run, At 8:36 in the morning, it went live. The board presentation began as usual. Jason clicked through his introduction, smiling, self-assured. Wearing the same navy blazer from every big meeting, Darren nodded along, leaning in with performative engagement. Then came the third slide. The room paused, on the screen, embedded at the bottom of the forecast model chart. A new line of text appeared in a soft gray font, almost easy to miss. The numbers are optimized, not real. Ask who changed the core. Silence. Someone coughed. Jason stared at the screen, blinking hard. Darren leaned forward, squinting. Fingers hovered uncertainly over laptops. One of the board members, a woman in a sharp cream suit, looked up. "Is this part of the presentation?" Jason's voice cracked slightly. It must be a formatting error. We'll move past." "Hold on," another voice cut in. This time, a senior director, a man I knew only by name, Martin Cross. "Who inserted that message?" Jason stammered, flipping backward through the slides, trying to find a version without the embedded line. But the message was hard-coded. No version of the deck would escape it now. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Martin opened his inbox. The auto-report system had already sent the raw output to each board member. There, at the bottom of the email, the same line of code had replicated. He hit reply all. "Who the hell is Tina, and why is she not in the room?" The air shifted. At 8:42 in the morning, I received a ping from our compliance officer. Subject, urgent. "Are you available for a brief today? System architecture integrity?" I didn't reply. Not yet. I sat back in my chair, heart steady, but every nerve taut like piano wire. It wasn't fear. It wasn't thrill. It was focus. The system hadn't crashed. It hadn't exploded. It had whispered, just loud enough to unsettle the people who mattered. For weeks, I had been erased. But this morning, I was in every room, without saying a word. By 10:30 in the morning, I was called into the 11th floor executive boardroom, a room I hadn't entered in months. The tone of the email was formal, urgent, and unmistakably cautious. "We'd appreciate your insights on the current system discrepancies, particularly regarding predictive model integrity." I walked in calmly. The way you walk into a room you already know by heart. Jason was already seated, pale and rigid. Darren paced near the projector screen, face tight with a forced half-smile. Around the long table sat members of the board, compliance, and, surprisingly, a client representative from Northbridge Health. I took the empty seat at the end of the table. No small talk, no greetings, just silence. Martin Cross, the senior board director who'd sent the now infamous "Who the hell is Tina" email, leaned forward. "Ms. Gureyas, we'd like to understand your involvement in the system's current architecture." But I opened my laptop, connected to the screen, and began. No emotion, no gloating, just facts. The predictive engine is currently producing inaccurate outputs due to altered weight configurations. The variables used in forecast modeling were reduced without adaptive compensation, which causes a margin drift that compounds over each cycle. I flipped to a chart, data overlays comparing the original model with the current altered version. The differences were undeniable. Additionally, I continued, the early warning alert system has been disabled in 3 tiers. This explains why failed shipments went undetected until client complaints surfaced. Several heads turned toward Jason. He said nothing. "Here," I said, pulling up the commit history, "is the record of each system change, who made them, and when." As you can see, the code signatures all trace back to Jason's credentials. Silence. Then came the twist. The Northbridge representative stood. "I'll keep this brief. We've worked with Tina for 5 years. Our operational success was built on her system. When the quality dropped, we knew something was wrong. Now we understand why." He turned to the board, eyes steady. "As of this morning, We've approved a transfer of our entire systems operations budget to a consulting agreement under Tina's name. She is the system. And frankly, we trust her more than we trust whatever this company has become. The room froze. Darren blinked like he hadn't heard correctly. Jason finally opened his mouth, only to close it again. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I just gathered my laptop, stood up, and said, "I'll forward documentation to compliance. Everything else is already in the logs." Then I walked out, leaving a silence far louder than any speech I could have given, because sometimes the most satisfying victory isn't the speech, it's letting the truth speak for you. By 8:20 in the morning, I packed the last of my things into a small gray tote. No ceremony, no announcements, just quiet hands folding a jacket and unplugging a charger. My nameplate was gone from the desk. No one had bothered to replace it. I didn't mind. The elevator ride down from the 11th floor felt slower than usual. Or maybe I just noticed it more, for the first time in months. I wasn't in a rush. The silence didn't press against me anymore. It held me like calm water. As I crossed the lobby, a familiar voice broke through the background noise. "You're not even going to say goodbye?" I turned. It was Sarah, from finance. She smiled, a little awkward, like someone seeing a ghost. She walked beside me toward the doors, eyes scanning the space as if to make sure no one else was listening. "You don't need to explain anything," she said softly. "Just for what it's worth, everyone saw what happened. Maybe not out loud, but we saw it." I didn't answer, just nodded as I pushed open the glass doors. Another voice came from behind. "Ko kom contratu, hitong naite koroi." It was Henry, Junior Dev, one of the few who still ran reports the old way. He didn't wait for a reaction, just slipped past and disappeared into the revolving doors. I stepped outside. The spring air was crisp, fresh in a way I hadn't felt in months. I pulled out my phone, tapped open the email I'd starred the night before. Subject: Offer confirmation. Principal Systems, Architect Northbridge had doubled my old salary. Full technical autonomy. No Darren, no Jason, just clean code, honest work, and a team that respected the architecture enough to let it breathe. As I scrolled, another email caught my eye, an old one still sitting in the archive. Subject: Realignment of roles. I smiled. For a long time. I thought that meeting had ended me. Now. I saw it for what it was. Not a demotion. A redirection. I didn't lose. I just realigned, higher. And this time, on my own terms.